Do not become an owner operator if you cannot calculate your rate per mile after the deadhead. Welcome back to another episode of the Smooth Operator Trucking, where we create the dream 1 mile at a time. I'm your host, Smooth Operator, and today we're going to be talking about calculating your cost per mile, and we're getting started right now. First time owner operator or looking to expand your knowledge on running a business and being an owner operator, keep watching to the end because this is the video for you. You really should not become an owner operator unless you understand the concept and know how to calculate your rate per mile after the deadhead. This is very important, and I think it's one of the more overlooked things in the industry when running your own truck. I hear a lot of guys say, I don't take cheap freight. Well, what is cheap freight? And are you sure that you're not taking cheap freight? And what I mean by that is guys are like, well, I won't haul anything for less than $2 a mile, or I won't haul anything for less than $3 a mile. Okay, that's fine, but um, how much are you getting paid after the deadhead? Because a lot of guys would think like, oh, I found a load that's paying $4 a mile, so it's a really good load. But if it's only going 100 miles, all right, that's $400. Then if you got a deadhead, I don't know, 200 miles to get it, then where does that leave you? So you have to be able to calculate those things, and obviously knowing your cost per mile is very important. Also, I talked about that in the previous video. So if you know your cost per mile, okay, then you can calculate how much you need to make your rate per mile after deadhead. So if you know your cost per mile is $1.50, right? That's your break even. That's covering all your fixed costs, your variable costs. That's covering your driver pay because that's very important. Make sure you include your driver pay in there, how much you paying yourself. Because if you had another driver in that truck, how much would you be paying? I'm not saying you have to pay yourself as much as you would pay another driver, but you have to include that into your cost per mile. You are an expense. You are a cost. You are a cost. So if let's say your cost per mile after everything is $1.50, and you take a load that's paying $3 a mile, um, let's say it's going 600 miles, but you have to deadhead 300 miles to get there, right? So that puts you right back at $1.50 a mile. But a lot of guys would be like, well, I don't take any freight that's less than $3 a mile, but so essentially you do, because if you wouldn't got that load that was paying $3 a mile, but you deadhead it 300 miles to get it, all right, and it was going 300 miles, then essentially you just cut your rate per mile in half anyways, and now you're already hauling freight for less than $2 a mile. So there's something very important to think about, something very important to take in consideration when you are looking at loads on a load board, or if you got contract freight, whatever. How far do you have to deadhead to get that load, and how much is it going to be, your rate per mile going to be after you deadhead to go get that load? Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. You've heard me talk about on my channel that I have deadheaded 1,000 miles to get a load before. I mean, that was a load that was paying over $7,000 gross. I think it was like $4 a mile or close to $4 a mile. And I deadheaded 1,000 miles. I didn't deadhead 1,000 miles on purpose. I miscalculated, and I thought I was a lot closer to where I had to go and get the load. And it really didn't matter. It took me 2 days to get there. I picked up the load, and I think I had that load off my truck within 4 days. So, I mean, again, your rate per mile after deadhead, and you also have to look at your rate per day. I'll talk about that in another video. But you definitely have to be able to calculate those type of things. But yeah, even after that 1,000 mile deadhead, it was worth it because it met my rate per mile that I like to be above. At that time, I think I like to be above $1.75 after deadhead. Now my goal is $2 a mile after deadhead. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I've got an older truck, so I try to put less miles on it because of how much the maintenance is, and I don't have to worry about a truck payment. So I can sit for a day or two if I have to. I won't sit too long, but I can sit for a day or two if I have to, if I can't find a load that meets my daily criteria. I think I try to do $800 a day at least, gross, and that's with Mercer Transportation. They get 25%. There's a 75-25 cut, but what I see on the load board is what I get. So if I see something paying $800, that's what I'm gonna get. That's what's going to the truck. The 25% has already been taken out. If I see something's paying $1,000, then that's what I'm gonna get. Obviously, you want to get more than $800 a day, but $800 a day is kind of like my minimum. If that load is paying above $2 a mile after deadhead and it's keeping me moving, I'll go get it for that $800. So yeah, it's things you have to take into consideration. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys just a really quick, simple way how to calculate your rate per mile after deadhead. Okay, say there's a load, it's paying $1,000. All right, pick up one day, deliver the next day. It's going 500 miles, right? So the rate on that is $2 a mile. All right. But let's say you've got a deadhead 100 miles to get to it. All you're going to do is take that $1,000, and instead of dividing it by 500, you're going to divide it by 600. And then your total comes to $1.66 per mile. Hey, if that works for you, then pull the trigger and take that load. If it doesn't work, then don't do it. All right. Um, I always say, like I said, mine right now is $2 a mile that I try to be above, even though my cost per mile is only $1.50. But if your cost per mile is $1.50, I think it's safe to say that you should be at least 10% above your cost per mile. So that's not a bad rate. So if your cost per mile is $1.50 per mile, and you find a load that after deadhead is paying $1.66, 10% of $1.50 is 15 cents. So that's real close. That's 16 cents. And if your cost per mile, if you're trying to get 10% above your cost per mile, then that will work for you. And the reason why I say it should be at least 10% above your cost per mile is because there's also a lot of things that sometimes it's hard to account for. And then if you had a driver in that truck, right? That's about how much you would probably make if that truck was running consistently and you had a good driver and the truck, was running decent. You would probably make about a 10% profit on that truck at the end of the year. So if that truck, I said that truck grossed $200,000, you would probably net 10% of that. So you'd probably be looking at $20,000 that you would make off that truck in a perfect world, right? And so that's what you're kind of looking at, because obviously you got to pay the driver, you got maintenance, if you have a truck payment, all the good stuff. But after it's all said and done, if you have someone in that truck, most likely if you're a small company, your profit margin is probably about 10%. Um, if you're familiar with the mega carriers, they operate on margins like 1, 3, 5%. I mean, they can do that though because they're so large and they're constantly turning out new drivers, so they can do that. But as a small fleet owner or a single truck owner or whatever, your margin, your profit margin should be a little larger. If it's below 5%, then you might be doing something wrong, or you might want to consider just not having someone in your truck. If you are operating your truck yourself, on average, you're probably looking at about a 40% return on your investment, or a 40% profit margin. So again, if you gross $200,000, 40% of $200,000 is $80,000. That's how much you should be, netting. But so yeah, so just something to keep taking consideration. Yeah, very important, and you just don't hear a lot of guys talk about it. You guys are just constantly talking about, I don't take cheap freight. I won't take anything less than $3 a mile. Guys be bragging like, oh, I did a load for $4 a mile. Yeah, you did a load for $4 a mile, but it went, you know, 100 miles. Okay, good, $400. But did that even cover your minimum cost per day? And then also, how far do you have to go to Deadhead and get that? Now, if that was like you were like already right there, 2 miles, 10 miles, okay, whatever. But if you got a Deadhead 100 miles to get that load, that cuts their rate per mile like down significantly after. So here's your call to action. I challenge you guys to start keeping up with your rate per mile after deadhead using the simple formula that I just gave you. All right. And that'll give you some more realistic numbers. Some guys, probably already know this, most guys do, but there might be one person watching this video right now that really didn't know that, or never took that into consideration. And if you do that and you do it consistently, you will see that you'll select your loads better, and you'll probably see some increases in your profits. Okay, all right, because like now you're getting a more realistic, all right, a more realistic picture of what you need to make rate per mile after deadhead, because you know your cost per mile, and then you know how much you're going to lose on deadhead and to go get that freight. All right, leave a comment below and let me know, how do you calculate your rate per mile differently? Do you just say, hey, as long as it's paying above $3 a mile and I can pick it up today and drop it off tomorrow, I'm gonna go get it? Or if as long as it meets your minimum um, daily rate, then I'm gonna go get it. How are you guys calculating, knowing that you are making a profit when you go and pick up a load? Are you just looking at what it's paying gross wise, or are you actually looking at what it's paying after the deadhead? Anyways, hope you guys found value in this video. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button, and please consider subscribing. Um, and as I always say, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. Hard times don't last, hard truckers do. And last, but definitely not least, stay smooth, my friends.